Day by day, little by little, we write the story of our lives. Join author Joe Walsh on a walk down memory lane with tenacious humans who didn't let their circumstances dictate their life and what they could become. Welcome to the Lemon Tree Memoirs of Courage podcast.
Today we are talking about grandparents raising grandchildren, and I'm honored. I have a very special guest, Beverly Maunus. She is the founder or co-founder of Grand Love. It's a nonprofit that focuses on just getting the word out about grandparents raising grandchildren and the needs that they need. And I found some staggering statistics, and I just want to just share these with the listeners. 33% of grandparents that are caring for their grandchildren have not even graduated from high school. 1/5 of grandparents have incomes that fall below the poverty line. There is a 49% unemployment rate for grandmothers who are raising their children. So how does this happen? How do grandparents wind up raising their children?
I think really just the love, it all comes down to that they don't want them in the system, because if they don't take them in and take care of them, then they end up in the foster care system, which, as we know, is already just got too many kids and not enough people and not enough workers to handle. I think there's 450,000 in this country right now that are actually in the system, and they just don't have the amount of homes, and they don't have the manpower to take care of these children. I know right now, I think the numbers are between 9 and 10 million children are actually being raised by their grandparents. So wow. If they weren't, then this country would have another 9 to 10 million children in the foster care system, and there just would not be enough homes for that.
Well, I share in my book, The Lemon Tree, about my mother was a singer. Just parenting was not in the genes for her. And it was my grandparents. I have more memories of being with grandparents than that I do my own parents growing up. So it is important that grandparents have the support. So talk about Grand Love. How did that come to be? Share your story.
Okay, well, where do we begin? Well, we ended up getting our grandson, and we were actually living in Indiana at the time. We've been in Texas 2 years now, but while we were in Indiana, we have a daughter that was struggling with addiction. And she just started to go down the hill, and we started to realize that, his needs weren't being taken care of, that she was actually falling asleep, while taking care of him, and just there was a lot of things going on that we could just tell that he just wasn't being taken care of. So really it was kind of over time. He wasn't in the system. He didn't get, taken from her, but we knew that it was just a matter of time before he would. So we, started to really take over the care of him. And so we had him for several years in Indiana, and then my husband's job moved us here to Texas. And it was really while we were here that I just started to talk to more people. I'm actually on a site on Facebook called Grandparents Raising Grandchildren, and there's thousands and thousands of these grandparents posting every few minutes of just the struggles. And I was just, to be honest with you, it was almost, I was on there all the time because I just couldn't believe, the needs, and that these grandparents, mostly grandmas, there was a lot of the couples that were married and had been married for many years were actually divorcing. That the husband, couldn't handle, in the 60s and 70s with now toddlers and babies, going through that again. And so just the needs, I think, I can't tell you how many light bills I've paid over the last few years, hearing of just these stories of, help me to keep these children. I don't want them. They're already struggling with the loss of the mom or the loss of the parent, and feeling abandoned, and now, to lose the only other person they know, which is the grandparent, would be devastating and traumatic again, for this child. So just how many, really just the needs. There's just...
So what are the needs? What, just the most important needs right now that you see?
There's so many, but I've tried to narrow it down too. I've actually asked on these sites, what is your, if there was one thing that we could help you with, what would the need be? A lot of them is daycare. There's a lot of the grandparents that have to work. Again, a grandma, trying to raise in her 60s or 70s, trying to raise now a few toddlers or babies.
Daycares are so expensive
They
now.
are.
I have a half sister, and it's like $750 a month.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how moms do it. I mean, unless you're making a really good living, or you've got support from family that's helping with that expense.
Yeah.
But so daycare, what else?
Legal. A lot of the grandparents are having to, their grandchildren might have been taken away from their parent, which is their child. And so now they're having to fight a legal battle to get these children out of foster care, or what they're trying to do, knowing their children, adult children, are, addicts. And that they need to have these children legally so that they can get the medical care for them, that they can enroll them in school, and they have to have custody of them or some kind of legal guardianship. So they have to pay court costs, they have to pay for attorneys, and most, what I'm finding, are a good percentage of them are on a fixed income. They're on Social Security, or they're disabled.
Yeah, and things for kids are expensive. Just expenses for kids.
Absolutely. Just even school supplies, or back to school. It's, there were so many people on there asking, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't afford backpacks. I can't afford all these school supplies. I can't afford the lunches. I mean, that's been a big topic too.
Wow. So is there support in the schools? Are the schools aware of the number of grandparents? Are there...
I don't think so. I think, to be honest with you, and that's kind of why I decided that, I need to do something, because I'm not in that. My husband has a good job. I was a photographer for 10 years, so financially we're fine. But for me, I just couldn't turn away from, these grandparents, need help. They really need help, and they're not getting it, that there needs to be more for them. And I think just the community, if we could, just kind of open our eyes. And if you know a grandparent across the street, maybe, go knock on the door and see if she needs anything, or if you could just, drop a basket of food off, or just, there's so many ways that you can help.
That's awesome. What about churches? I know you're a Christian. I am too. And does your church, or do you see that churches are finding that this is a problem going on out in the community?
Again, I just don't think they know, to be honest with you. And that's kind of the pull of my heart right now, is to just raise an awareness of what's going on. I really think this is just, people don't really know about it, and I think the other part of that is the addictions that are involved. And it's kind of, there's a lot of shame and a lot of embarrassment that you might have a daughter or a son that's an addict, and now you've had to take their children. So you don't really want to publicize of why you have these children. I think people do assume, and it's not always due to addiction. It could be due to an illness that your child has. Mental illness, yes. Or even, there's a lot of military, that go on deployment, so the grandparents have to step in. It's not just always addiction, but I think for the ones, because I struggled with that myself, was, people would say to me, well, why do you have him? Why are you raising him? And then I would have to, disclose that my daughter struggles, with addiction. And there shouldn't be any shame in that,
Did you feel that the school moms, the moms of children your grandson's age, welcomed you, or was it they just didn't know how to react? Maybe
it was more that, and I think just wanting to know, like, well, why do you have him? I mean, and to be honest with you, I mean, everybody in the schools that our grandson's been at, they've all been very nice. But again, it's so hard. It's like, these parents are 20, 30 years younger than you, and, you really don't have a lot in common with, that generation. And so, you kind of, and it's sad. It's sad. I remember sitting, at my grandson's open house in kindergarten, and our last daughter had just gone off to college, and we were empty nesters, and here I find myself back in a kindergarten classroom with all these younger moms and dads. And I remember the teacher saying, okay, I'd like everybody to kind of introduce themselves. And I didn't really want to do that. And I really didn't want to do it because I didn't want our grandson kind of labeled before he even had a chance to start. There must be, why our grandparents raising this child, maybe stay away from him a little bit. And we've kind of had that. We had that in the church in Indiana, to be honest with you. When they knew what our daughter struggled with, it was kind of, he might have that too. So there's some stigma there, So there's a lot of things that these grandparents carry, that I want to get rid of that, because in a way, and I'm not talking about myself because I just feel like I'm kind of a younger grandma, but some of the ones that are older, it's hard enough, and not just hard enough. I mean, there's so much joy too that comes along with it. The fact that you can, parent again, and you tend to be wiser. You don't tend to have as much energy, but you have this definitely quite a few pros there too versus the cons.
Well, I know there's a church in Dallas that does a program called the Prodigal Ministry, and it's really to help families of adult children or teens that are going through whatever, it's an addiction or whatever they're going through. And I think just as important is this ministry. You think you've got to pray for this prodigal, but what about their children?
Yes, absolutely.
It's really just hearing from you and speaking with you has raised my awareness. I was not aware. We have so much on our plates that, I have such a love for seniors and the needs for seniors, but the needs for these children, they are going to be our seniors one day too. So we want to, nurture them, and we want them to have every opportunity. So talk about how you got involved in foster care, and I know you shared with me, and it's a wonderful story.
Oh gosh. To be honest with you, I've always had a heart for children, and I always, I'd see these, I just couldn't even in my wildest dreams comprehend a child just going to live with strangers. I just think that, gosh, how could that be? And sleeping in a bed and, with people that you don't even know. And really, I mean, I have my own story, and I don't know if I could touch on it just for a few minutes, but I was sexually abused by my dad in England for my whole growing up years. And then I ended up going to Germany to coach gymnastics. I got married very young. I think I was just looking for that father figure, which happens to a lot of girls when, this dad that's supposed to love them and protect them, violates that trust. Then for a girl, and I know it happens to boys too, and it does something to you. So for me, I didn't really realize how much of a mess I was until I left the country and was kind of out there on my own. And so I got into some relationships that weren't good and weren't healthy, and met a man and married him, and pretty soon realized, he's an alcoholic and wonderful guy, but struggled with alcoholism and was unfaithful to me many times. We ended up, really just not doing well. We were a mess together. And I ended up with severe panic attacks and anxiety due to the sexual abuse, and that could be a whole nother show. Anyway, my husband at the time ended up leaving me, and so I was on my own with my daughter at the time. It was only a year old, and a guy next door came and knocked on my door one night and brought a Bible with him and asked if he could come in. And I'd never really seen a Bible before. And so I thought, well, what do I have to lose? You know, here I am. I was 20 at the time in a foreign country and had no family. Had this daughter now, and it was just the two of us. Didn't even have a driver's license and was kind of wondering what was going to happen to me. And this guy knocks on a door with a Bible at 9 o'clock at night. And so I invited him in, and he started to read the Bible. And it was, to be honest with you, it was the first time in my life I just felt peace. It was just this peace. And I remember it took me back to when I was about 10 and my dad had abused me one night. I remember looking out of my window and down the street and really just asking, you know, just kind of asking to the world, you know, is there something more? Is this all there is? It just felt so unreal, you know, and that there had to be more to life than this. And so when this neighbor came over and was sharing, you know, speaking about the Lord and reading scripture, this is what I was looking for back then when I was 10. It was almost like God showing himself to me back then. And here he was confirming that, yes, there is something else and it's me, you know. So that was you know, I gave my life to the Lord a few weeks after that. We reconciled, and then things got bad again. And so I put myself in therapy and spent the next 4 years actually in therapy. And I actually separated from my husband. He had met somebody else. And so I was then on my own with 2 girls for a few years. And that time I just started to pray that God would use me. I mean, every night I would pray, God, just use me. And 3 years later, he took me into a children's jail. And at the time, we were living in Florida. We spent 10 years there, and I ended up in a children's jail, juvenile detention centers, but they are actually children. There was girls as young as 8 and all the way up to 17. And once they turned 18, obviously they were in the adult prison.
What does an 8-year-old do to wind up in prison?
I know. Well, I could tell you the story, but it probably would take too long.
Yeah.
But really, they're victims too. What I came to find out is every single one of those children were victims of abuse and other things that led them to do something. A lot of it was drugs, to be honest with you, but the 8-year-old it wasn't. But I just had never seen anything like it in my life. I had no idea. And in Florida, there's 200 juvenile detention centers, and these kids are locked in cells every night. And that, you know, I used to go home. I used to cry all the way home, you know, just that we shouldn't be putting children in prison. We just shouldn't. You know, that is not okay. But while I was there, I just knew that's where, when I'd been praying for the 3 years, that this is, you know, when I said, God, use me, he was using me in the jails. And remember, another church was going in there, and they were doing a Bible study. I didn't feel qualified to teach the Bible, and I remember saying, just don't ask me to teach anything. I just want to love the girls, you know. And after 3 months of doing that, this church pulled out, and it was just me. And so again, I remember just going, I can't do this, and really just asking the Lord, you know, help me. And he just said, tell your story. And I was like, I don't have a story. And it's like, you do, just tell your story. So I remember just sitting on the floor with these 30 girls and telling them a little bit about my story of the sexual abuse and the anxiety attacks, and then about a God that just loves them so much, you know, that he gave his son to die for them. And just how his love just completely changed my life, completely. You know, I actually went back and forgave my dad. My dad came to know the Lord. My brothers and my sister and my mother, I mean, all came to know the Lord because of really, you know, something that was meant for evil, you know, but God really turned it to good. And I stayed in that jail, going in weekly for about 7 years. And really what I came to find out while I was in that jail, that 90% of the girls had been sexually abused too. And that most of them were in the foster care system. You know, most of them were being abused in the foster care system. There were some wonderful families that take in these children, so I'm not, you know, going to say that all foster care is bad, but just from my experience with 7 years in Indiana, 4 years in Indiana going into the jails and 7 years in Florida, every week that spoke to thousands and thousands of these girls, and all the stories were the same. They had come out of foster care. They'd been abused at home. They'd been abused in the foster care system. Some had been in 20 to 30 different foster care homes. And I just got, to be honest with you, where I just couldn't even go in anymore after 11 years. We need to do something with the foster care system.
So is it lack of supervision at these
They just don't
foster
have enough
homes?
homes, I think is what it is. There's just not enough families that want to take in these troubled kids.
I know.
You know, because the fear of, and I'm guilty too. I remember when we had our 3 daughters, and I remember, saying, let's just take one. And my husband didn't want to, because he said if it was just the 2 of us, he would. But he was scared of what's already happened to them, and that then they could, do something to our girls. And I looked at it the opposite, that, gosh, what an incredible opportunity for our daughters to really just love this child, this other, but I really believe that's what it is. There's just not enough homes. And so, really the criteria is you have a home, it's got a door on it, it's got windows, and it's clean, and you're an okay person. I mean, you do have to go through a background check, and there are classes and all of that. So it's not an easy thing to do. But at the same time, it's, you don't really know who's taking care of these children, and the ones that are, they might have 10 kids.
So what percentage of the kids have some, even though they're in foster care, are the parents just not involved at all, or they visit on occasion, or
it depends. I mean, there's different levels. I mean, really, I think the goal of the system is to reunify them with their parents. I mean, children do way better being raised by their own blood. They just do. Even, I mean, some of the most abandoned children, they just want their parents. Our grandson had a wonderful relationship with his mother, our daughter. She was a wonderful mother, but she was ill. She was ill, but that doesn't negate the fact that, my grandson and her son had a few years with her, and she was in school to go to be a teacher. She'd already done 2 years of schooling. I mean, wonderful, educated. I mean, healthy in other ways, but unhealthy in the other way. And but the bond they had was strong, and so our grandson used to cry and cry for his mom, and just he wanted his mom. He didn't want us, but we were really second. I couldn't even imagine, if he had gone from that, losing his mom, to then just being one of 10 or 12 kids in a home with nobody that truly had a connection with him. So I think that's just what we've witnessed and what we've experienced with him. It's kind of set me on fire, to be honest with you, to try and keep these children in the family, and to keep them with the grandparents or a family member, an aunt or an uncle that has a connection with them, because it's so traumatic. We've seen it, we've witnessed it,
So why do you think this hasn't made the news? Why do you think it isn't a bigger community issue?
I don't really know, and that's why I have truly, with the Lord pushing me here, is, just we need to be speaking out about it now. There's all this on, and I was a single mom, so I'm not, believe me, I was a single mom with 2 daughters. We want to help the single mother, or we want to help, just so many other categories, but the grandparents that are raising grandchildren, for whatever reason,
they need the help too.
They need the help desperately. I mean, and they need the help not only for themselves, but for these children that are the next generation. And these are the children that will end up in the juvenile detention centers. They'll end up to make up the big prison system, that is already a ridiculous amount. These grandparents that have these grandchildren are saving the taxpayers in this country $6.2 billion. Yet there's hardly any funds or resources available to them. And that's really the cry of my heart, is to raise awareness and, let's start helping them. I know President Trump did actually sign a bill last year. I Googled it.
That's awesome.
Yes, he did. And so I know now there's for him, the president, to actually sign a bill last year and to raise awareness, and I think get some task forces in place, he's aware of the fact that this is an epidemic. The opiate addiction is at epidemic proportions, and these children are ending up with grandparents or another relative caregiver, but for the most part, it's grandparents.
Well, and everybody wants to give. Everybody says, how can I help? But they don't really know what to do.
Yes.
And just this nonprofit Grand Love, which you and your the mayor's wife from Prosper came together and started this nonprofit. And I know you've got a dinner coming up, and talk about that. I plan to be there. I'm really excited on October the 12th. So talk about this fundraiser and what it cost and what we're going to be able to, what the event's going to be like.
Yeah. Okay. And really quick again. So when I moved to Texas, we're here 2 years. I live in McKinney. I was looking in this Prosper McKinney magazine. Normally I throw them away. I'm sorry, whoever. I just don't really read through it. And I did. And he actually had an article on the mayor of Prosper. And he went on to be talking about all these things. And then what caught my eye was that him and his wife are raising 2 grandsons. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow. So I contacted his wife. I found her, and she's a realtor in Prosper and McKinney. And we got to talking, and we both are raising grandsons, and that's when we both said we need to do something. We're in a position where we're healthy enough, that we can really do something. So we've been talking for this last year, meeting regularly. Actually, I went to Thanksgiving in Arkansas with their family. They kind of just welcomed us in, and they have a different story too, where their grandchildren actually were in the foster care system. So they have a different story than I do, which again, they ended up having to spend several $1,000s to try and get their grandsons out of foster. And most grandparents don't have that. So there's another argument there. I would like we had to, and I'm sorry I've gone off the subject, but for just a minute here, we ended up adopting our grandson, but we ended up paying the same fees that somebody, that doesn't even know him. So I'm not sure why we're having to.
Should not be.
No,
it should not be that complicated.
No, it shouldn't. And we'd already had him in our home for 4 years and had been taking care of him. Yet now we had to do a background check. We had to have a home study done. We had to have a therapist come in and talk to us and pay all these thousands of dollars. And I'm just thinking, to keep this child safe. So some laws need to be changed and that. But anyway, we're doing this benefit because we really, really want to raise awareness. We need a website. We need a lot of things to just really move us forward to get this out there, of just how many there are and the help that they need. It's a farm-to-table dinner.
Everybody loves that.
Yes, and I don't know if you've heard of Local Yokel.
Yes, I love Yokel Local. They have wonderful salads.
Yes, and
burgers and barbecue.
Yes, it's wonderful food. And so they're actually going to do the catering. They're going to do a big 4-course meal. It's going to be in this big old barn with chandeliers. So I've actually not seen it yet, but Lena, the other grandma, has seen it. Hasn't not just seen it, she knows the person that has it. And we're going to have a little jazz band, and just going to have a wonderful, wonderful meal, a wonderful time of just, enjoying the night out. And I think I might speak just a little bit about, again, just who we are and what this is about, and that we need to really just invest in these children and invest in these grandparents. And if I can, really quick, we need donations for the silent auction. If anybody would like to donate, I'm actually walking around all these stores, and it's not my gift.
People want to help, and if you just share your heart, you're going to get some donations. So
thank you.
They say if you throw enough mud, it sticks. So just keep knocking on doors.
All right,
and I think you're going to be surprised, pleasantly surprised. Well, I'm so excited about this event, and Beverly, thank you so much. Can't wait to read your story, and I'd love to have you again because you do have such a story. But you have a story of courage and forgiveness, and Just because my book, Lemon Tree, is about forgiveness, how did you forgive your dad?
Well, to be totally honest with you, it was only through the Lord. I mean, because, I think humanly, people have even said, how could you do that? And I really can't, I don't have an answer, except it obviously was just, the Holy Spirit that comes to live inside of us when we give our lives to the Lord that enabled me to do that. But I can honestly tell you it was probably one of the best decisions I ever made, because it not only set my dad free, but it also set myself free. I didn't feel bound anymore to this that had happened to me. And my dad used to call me up. He was in England after I did forgive him, and at the time he'd been married to my mother for 30 years, and he said he was going to go kill himself, when I actually confronted him, and not in evil. I mean, I didn't do it in an angry way. I just wanted this out, that it wasn't going to stay in the darkness, that it needed to be exposed, because my siblings were having children and I didn't want anybody, it to happen to them.
Sure.
So that was the only reason that I even confronted it. But my dad, said he was going to go kill himself, and a year or two later, he called me. I'm living over here in America. He's in England, in a little small town up in Yorkshire. And he just said, are you sure I'm forgiven? And I said, Dad, absolutely. God, I mean, he's forgiven all of us, he's forgiven all of us. So how could I not forgive you? I'm a sinner too. We're all sinners. That's what he came for. That's what he sent his son for, right? And so of course you're forgiven, and he would call me regularly and just say, are you sure? And I'd say, Dad, as white, your sins are gone from, as far as the east is from the west, they are gone from you. And, he would say he was sorry. And, I came to know my dad, and it happened to him too. His grandparents had abused him, and I think it had just been one generation after another, and it stopped with me. But you can forgive. I mean, with the Lord's help, you can, and it really sets you free, and I think that's why he tells us to do it. It's for our benefit, and not only that, he's forgiven us, so we need to forgive.
And look how you're helping others, and look how you're using that sadness to bring life to other people, and their strength in the struggle. But thank you so much, Beverly. This has been amazing, and I'm looking forward to your event. And go to Facebook. It's called Grand Love, and get information.
Oh, and buy a ticket.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Are we good?
We're good.
I hope
you
I didn't
did
talk too
great.
much.
Thank you for joining us on the Lemon Tree Memoirs of Courage podcast, hosted by author Joe Alsh. You can find more information on Joe's beginnings and the Lemon Tree at thelemontreebook.com.